I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, I would hazard a guess that there is no one in this room who has never heard that verse before. It is, in fact, apparently number 20 on the list of most frequently read verses on Bible Gateway. And we hear it a lot. We read it at funerals. It's a source of comfort and hope to us in all kinds of moments in life. It's also how we present Christianity to the wider world. Because we like to paste it on billboards and the sides of buses. To those who may not see or know Christ exactly the way that we do. And that's what I find particularly challenging about this verse. Now, I've lived in California my whole life pretty much. I have spent time living in other places for a couple of years at a time, but more or less I have been here since, the better part of a century, half a century. And I can say, just like I'm sure you all have noticed, this is an increasingly pluralistic state. It's always been a place where people have come from all over the place. But according to the last census, 27% of Californians were born outside of the United States. They're not only not from California, but they come from completely different parts of the world. See, we're in the middle of an economy that is the driver, one of the main drivers of our shrinking world, because it draws people here. Technology and our entertainment makes our global village more and more interconnected. So, if this is where we live, and this is who we live with, how can we talk about or justify what seems like this very rigid and exclusive claim that comes out of this text when we gather as Christians on Sunday mornings? Now, I know there's times when lots of Christians kind of wish this text. And I have to say, when I read it, getting ready for my sermon preparation, I definitely checked the other two readings as well, just to see if I had an easier in. But I will take I am the way and the truth of life over the stoning of Stephen any day. Let me tell you. But when I Googled it, the first thing that popped up was this wonderful article by Harvey Cox, who happened to be one of my seminary professors. So I'm like, oh, thank you, someone I know I can trust on this front. I attended Harvard Divinity School and it was a place where there were students from all over the world, from lots of different Christian denominations, and in fact, many, many different religious traditions. The thing that brought us all together was our desire to prepare for careers in ministry, teaching, research, social change, and all kinds of things. I mean, we had people who were planning to do media. It was a great place. But what held us together was this desire to do this in this environment of academic rigor, intellectual freedom, and diversity of by side with Baptists, Congregationalists, Unitarians, rabbinical students, Wiccans, Buddhist nuns, and even atheists and agnostics. It was great. In class, we had lots to talk about. Lively academic discussions about religion and social issues and spiritual practices. But you know what? It seemed like as often as not, we somehow just managed to avoid the topic of our personal faith lives. We just didn't always know how to talk about that stuff together. because we knew that we all came from very different faith commitments. That tendency to hold back that thing that matters the most about our faith is precisely the thing that Harvey Cox in that I read. See, it's this urge, and we all have it, to stay on the safe territory. Overarching ideas, themes of our respective traditions, but, never really getting to know each other as living, breathing people of faith. And what happens is we end up hiding this whole essential part of who we are. And that lets the people from the most extreme beings who represent us on this front. And then are we surprised? We still find ourselves not always getting along across various religious traditions. Now, we're not alone in struggling with this question, but for Christians, I think that this tendency means that we avoid talking about Jesus and our faith and how Jesus fills our life. That old adage, never talk politics with your in-laws, right?
Yeah.
Only, there's always that one relative who aggressively spouts his or her political beliefs as the only way. I see Francis is laughing over there.
Oh, yeah.
Neither approach leads any of us to look forward to those family gatherings, does it? So instead, Professor Cox suggests that if we really do consider Jesus our way and our truth and our life, then why not try following Jesus's model for engaging with people? Because Jesus, when he went out and met people from the whole diversity of what he was living in the middle of at the time, always acted as an agent of transformation, reconciliation, and peace. Now, in his article, Professor Cox lays out 5 ways that Jesus did this, 5 examples that can help us with interfaith dialogue. Try and apply those to the context that we find ourselves in here in California in the 21st century. In other words, how does Jesus show us the way that we can encounter others in our daily lives in this amazing mixing bowl where we find ourselves? So first, let's think about how Jesus reminds us that things are rarely black and white. Our scriptural traditions show us a Jesus who likes to lay things out that seem like they really can't fit side by side. Jesus does this because he wants to spur questions. He sees them as teachable moments. And he ultimately uses them to build sense of reconciliation and growth in the people that he encounters. It's Jesus' way of challenging all of those walls that separate people. Now, today's gospel is a perfect example of how Jesus uses this kind of creative tension. Right before he says, "I am the way and the truth and the life," Jesus also tells his disciples, "In my Father's house there are many rooms." So, Jesus seems to be saying that there's, on one hand, one path, and on the other hand, plenty of destinations. Now, it is not easy to hold those two ideas together, and is a perfect example of why we should never ever take a particular biblical passage in isolation from the rest of what is being said around it, right? Because it it means something so much richer and so much deeper if you're looking at that kind of creative tension that Jesus used on purpose. I think what we're thinking about today, we can take this to suggest that we must, when dealing with people who have different faiths than we do, always be who we are. But also always be open to meeting others for who they are too. We don't have to make other people like us in order to have a genuine cross-faith exchange or relationships in our day-to-day life. And we don't have to change who we are. We get to be in that creative. The second thing is that when Jesus talks to people, whether or not they happen to be his followers, Jesus always asks them what's troubling them and what they want. Jesus likes to listen. He listens to people's questions, and then he responds with stories that are drawn from people's everyday lives. Jesus is showing all of us God's kingdom in his own very real acts of sharing and healing with folks who are so too, though we may worship different gods, or sometimes people who worship none at all, we are out there in our lives together. And this is true the younger we are, but I think it's true for all of us. You walk through our days together, stressing about that project that we are all trying to complete, trying to figure out how to get through the grocery store in time to make it to the carpool pickup, right? And when something goes wrong at home, to our neighbors, us out, right? Everyone is getting to know each other's creed by sharing the basic stuff of life, trusting each other with the things that we care about the most. And that gives each of us insight into the other and the things that underlie all of that caring. Jesus would challenge us to be vulnerable and open with each other in this rather difficult but powerful mode of relating. We're not encouraged, keep ourselves at a distance and hold tight those hopes and those needs. Thirdly, Jesus reminds us that religion in and of itself can be a mixed blessing. Jesus never ignores how it is sometimes made to be hurtful to people. And he is fine calling this out even when it comes from inside his own tradition. I think this is important because in a diverse context, it doesn't require us to shut down our judgment. Instead, Jesus is calling us to look closely at how what we believe, that's our dogma, and what we practice, our piety, affects the people around us. For us today, I think this means that we don't have to just accept everything done in the name of religion. I mean, we can still challenge misogyny and homophobia and racism, hatred. We can speak from our own deeply held of faith. But it also means that we have to be honest with ourselves and call out the ways that our own fold also misuses its religiosity to sometimes dominate or frighten or oppress. That's tough, but it's the kind of engagement that is an essential part of being people of faith in all religions, and especially when we are all in this world together. Fourthly, Jesus frequently demonstrates that sometimes refraining from judgment be needed. See, Jesus takes all kinds of flack for eating with the wrong people or talking to the wrong people or who he touches or who he chooses to heal. And that's something that Jesus is saying we don't need to get so worked up about. Because Jesus wants us to know that when it comes to sharing God's love and God's healing and God's reconciliation, nothing matters more. Now, in our culture, we tend to see religious practice as something that's very serious. But Jesus would encourage us to get to know God by, becoming like children sometimes, open to learning, playful, creative, and accepting. He wants us to sometimes be able to have a sense of humor about it too, right? Not always so serious. Now, I think we're getting better at that. I mean, we know that we have to figure out what to cook when hosting our Jewish or Hindu or Muslim friends and colleagues, and we can get out there and have fun exploring the possibilities that might not be our. I don't know about y'all, but one of the lessons I had to learn when I was in school with our kids was that the PTA meeting might not start on what we thought was on time, because some of the people in our school came from, we went to a very international school, and there were people who had a much more fluid sense of time and when things started than we did. We had to be, good with that. See, we share with each other how to be spiritual people through all kinds of things. And I don't know if in multicultural celebration Scotts Valley held yesterday, but I am. Oh, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing all about that at coffee hour today, because that's the kind of thing we're talking about: playful engagement and sharing. So finally, number 5, Jesus tells us that God meets us in the stranger. That means that not only can we expect to find God present in everyone, no matter how foreign their faith or practices may seem to us, but also that this may in fact be precisely the place that God needs us to meet Jesus. So be prepared. Be prepared to be transformed and renewed in your understanding of all kinds of ways that God is at work in people, as well as how God's at work inside you. Every time you walk out your door in this amazing, rich, multicultural, multi-religious landscape, that's something that Jesus might be waiting to show you. See, Jesus is asking us all the time, who do you think I am? Jesus is our way and our truth and our life. He's part of who we are and how we live our lives as disciples. Jesus is showing us a way to live as agents of God's reign of peace and transformation and reconciliation. And he's shown us how to do this with all kinds of people. But most importantly, Jesus tells us that it is imperative that we do this in order to know God and God's work in the world and in us. And I think we all know that the alternative is something that looks a bit like that chilling story about Stephen. Because when we avoid engaging each other as who we really are as people of faith, then we have left it to the fanatics to take over our interreligious relations. And all we have to do is look at our news feeds each day to know that that approach leads us just throwing stones at each other, and that is not what we want. It's not what we've been called to. So instead, we can use the words of our second reading. Let us be like living stones. Because every rock is created by God, uniquely shaped. It's been fashioned, but then it's out there and it's rubbing up against all the other rocks and the water. and being made new all the time, a little bit more polished, something, under the surface getting revealed. It's our calling as disciples of the way of Jesus to discover all of the myriad ways that these living stones fit together. Because this world, our spiritual home, and it's for all. Amen.
Amen.